All right, we've got our tax increment financing study group. Today's April 5, 1 o'clock. We've got our whole group today, and we've got a facilitator today who I'll ask that she introduce herself, and then I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, I'm Liz Allen Fay with Strategy and Leadership. Behind me is Rachel Moore-Beard. We like three names in our company. I don't know why that is. So I'm just Liz and she's just Rachel, and we're going to take you through a process this morning with the intent of really being able to confirm what your recommendations are moving forward. And then we'll talk a little bit about the process and how this will roll into a report.
Great.
With that, we're going to go into small groups. Do you want to adjourn a formal meeting and come back in?
Well, why don't can we talk about what we're going to do in the small group first?
So here's what I'm thinking. Let's make sure that fits with what you all are thinking. Is I've received all the feedback around from the group input, and we have compiled that all as much as we could into a coherent form. As much as we could is the operative word. And so what a process I want to use that will help us, you guys, think through this in an efficient way is we're going to divide up into three subgroups. And when Paulette comes, we'll just put her with one of the groups. And then we have a whole set of documents for you to review. And what I want you to do is, are these all full documents? Okay. And what we're going to do, we're going to reorganize in just a minute, is we're going to divide them up into some sets of recommendations for you as a pair to read through and make any edit, changes, or additions to. So that you're not all looking at the same document at the same time. So Rachel, will you reorganize this for me? Yeah. Thanks. You're not looking at all the same documents at the same time. You're looking at a subset of that. And then when you're done, you will move that to the next group. They will read everything that you wrote beforehand, and then again, make any additional recommendations. You with me so far? Additions? We'll do that 3 rounds. Make sense? So we'll divide them into 3s. And then we'll come back, and I will give them back to the group, the original group, and my goal for you is to look through it and see what has been developed as a result. While you are doing that work, we're going to put flip charts around the wall. And what we want to do is then start collecting what are the recommendations, what are the final recommendations. And as I looked at those, I'll tell you they seem to fall in a couple different buckets. One is around communication. And you may decide that one is communication/education. We'll decide that. One is around process. And then the third one I can't tell, and this will become clear as you're looking through it. It may be around rules or structures. There may be a third or a fourth one there. So we'll identify what are those different buckets and start populating the recommendations in a way that you can all agree with them. Is that clear? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so my hope is that we'll spend about the first 45 minutes or an hour with you all just doing work on your own in the room. And then we will have the remaining 2 hours roughly to then get them up and finalize them. And then before I leave with you all, we will talk about what are the next steps to finishing the final report, what kind of process we want to use.
Okay.
Good with that?
So with that, for the video, so we're going to go into small groups. This is still a public meeting. The members of the public here are welcome to gather around and listen. We're not getting input from the public, but anybody who's here from the public is welcome to listen to anything that they want to listen to. The only reason we're going to cut off the video is because with 3 small groups going, the sound is just going to be the 3 groups talking over each other on the video, which isn't very helpful. Obviously, the end result of what we come up with in the last couple hours of the meeting will be on video again, but we're going to adjourn the TV formal portion of this so we can work in small groups for a while. Everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right, let's cut off the video then. Thank you. All right, thanks. So we started at 1, and it's now about 2:38, and we're back on. We've had small group sessions that our visitors from the public were able to listen in on, and now we're back. And so back to you.
Thank you. I keep looking to you because this is not my work, this is your work. The only reason I'm here is to help make sure it gets compiled into a coherent form. And so as we're looking at these recommendations, I always want to know that the recommendations are actionable, actually that they're feasible and that they're actionable, and you can tell who needs to do them. Otherwise, they're just ideas, they're really not recommendations. And so with your permission, I'm going to keep pushing to make sure those recommendations are clear and constructed in that form. And as I said, we're going to continue to pull up the policy, process and policy, but let's look at the ones we have so far under education and accountability. You can see where the heart of the bulk of your work has been. Do y'all see it? It's pretty clear, yeah. So around communication and transparency, MDHA to post all TIF board agenda, full board meetings, and materials and minutes online.
One of the groups inserted TIF into that, and I guess I didn't understand that insertion.
I guess that was my insertion, and I guess the question that I had was, I thought that our focus was about TIF, so if it's about TIF, I thought that was great. The idea of expanding and something what MDHA ought to do just seemed different from a purview perspective. Not that they should not have do that, I just was relating it back to the work that we were doing.
But then do they disaggregate their TIF work from their other work?
I think that what I was thinking is that our policy work in here was around TIF, and that was kind of where my focus was.
Yeah, if it ended up saying, so the TIF in front of board is probably not right, but their full materials as it relates to TIF is probably fine.
Yeah.
Right.
And Charles, practically, would that be all the materials?
No,
No.
no.
Does that make sense? So for MDH to post all board agenda, full board materials, and minutes online that relate to TIF activities?
Sure.
And Bob, that's not to say that
The rest of it.
Well,
the best practices might be something else. I just was clarifying it
Yeah,
related to this.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yes?
Good.
Cool. We good? Everybody good with this? All right, because I'm going to keep checking these off. Check. Create an integrated map on nashville.gov and MDHA's website.
There's a ... after that, I think.
A map
was
of
over
what?
here.
A map of
I
what?
think it was
Right.
talking about the redevelopment districts.
Right.
Oh, okay.
There's a ... behind it.
Create an interactive map on Nashville.gov or MDHA's to show where redevelopment districts and TIF-funded projects are.
Okay, okay. That's very different.
Yeah, so it's ...
For purposes of here, redevelopment districts are RD, TIF-funded projects. Yes?
Yes.
Yep.
Cool. And then there was also create TIF explainer similar to Metro Human Relations Commission piece on affordable housing.
Yeah, so we all know what that is because we've seen the
I
piece.
understand that.
And it's a couple-page infographic piece that is lovely. It really is explains a hard subject easily, and for several months, a couple of us, mostly me, was supposed to talk to them to figure out who they had put that together, and
So would
that's
this be fair to say utilizing the model of the Metro Human Relations Committee
Yes.
piece on affordable housing? Is that, am I good with this?
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's even better.
There are two booklets.
And a third one coming, right?
Yeah, but they just have two right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to use shorthand so I'm not spending your time
Right.
watching me write. Utilizing the model of the Metro Human Relations Commission piece on affordable housing, would that be correct?
pieces. Yeah.
Or booklets is even better.
Should I just say utilizing the book? No.
No, it's not a book.
I got you.
Can
On
you send me
affordable housing
the link
booklets?
for that, so I can send it to her? And Paulette's going to send me the link, or us the link for that, so you can see what it is that we're talking about.
Because here's my thinking, that you're going to charge me to take this and now put these into a coherent set of recommendations. And so we're not getting back together again. So that's why I want to make sure the wording truly reflects the will of this group. So utilizing the model of the Metro Human Relations Commission affordable housing booklets,
So there's a print version.
create,
And an online
help me
version.
with create a
Yes,
similar mechanism.
yeah.
Yep.
Create similar
Product.
information products.
Create,
Yeah, so there's a print version and there's an online version.
Yeah.
And so work product is sort of a gross sounding phrase. But, I don't know, what,
Communication.
Similar presentation,
Say that again?
similar presentation.
Using
Utilizing the
similar
model.
Communication strategy. Communication.
create similar resources.
There you go.
Resources, yeah,
Resources.
yeah, that's good.
Okay. Oh, one was transparency recommendations, reporting purpose and process. I hate to tell you, but that's not a recommendation. So help me under, and it was applications, awards, denials, public purpose.
I think that was intended to be a list of the things that will be included in the information.
Materials.
In the materials,
The resource.
It's number one. Right?
yeah.
First,
If you're fine with that, I'm just going to add this into the document.
That'd be fine.
Good. I need a code. If we don't have a code, I can't figure it out. Okay. And then education, there were two. Make all TIF materials
From our study committee available.
from your study group.
Yeah, we've posted a lot of things online, and I think we wanted to try and find a way to preserve those.
Yeah, and somebody had written in
Who's going to
who,
do that? Right.
We were found out.
and that's a really good question.
Well,
Here's
it
the
was-
thing I want you
The
to-
who was related to update.
Right.
Right.
Well, there's that question too.
It's got to have a data owner.
So here's my question for you. Do you see in the future that there will be information that MDHA will have responsibility for sharing, providing, and will there be then separate information that Metro government will have responsibility for sharing and providing?
I think one of the challenges is there's no one person responsible for TIF or one entity, well, I guess MDHA to a degree, but in terms of this ongoing educational process, there's not a bot.
Then that's the recommendation.
Create a single portal.
That's the recommendation.
Maintain, it's a
Yeah.
single portal
We help.
for
I'll tell you what it felt like
TIF.
when Richard and I were talking, we figured that all the things that we just listed up here was probably two more people for somebody.
It's probably what?
Two more people,
Staff
one or
people.
two more staff people.
Wow.
Yeah,
to
we kept
do
saying that
all
too, is
of this sort
who's
of,
going to be doing all this work.
So the
it doesn't
recommend,
just, it's not
Having,
gonna just happen and get done.
so one may be also that if you want to, so one is create a single portal for information regarding this study group's work and subsequent information.
right,
Is that fair?
yes.
Okay. Now, to your point, do you want to include in this set of recommendations head count?
Well, I think that we've listed a lot of things that need to get done. Unless there's somebody that is responsible for getting all these things done, it's just not gonna happen.
You got to have up there somewhere, just identify the resources needed to implement all of these recommendations.
Yeah,
Or
Well,
provide.
that's accountability.
Identify the
I think
resources.
that's accountability, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously some are easier than others, like the first one about posting stuff is doable with current resources. The creating an interactive map, I think that is a project of somebody who exists.
And is it your responsibility as a study group to identify the how?
Right. But who's going to
Well,
go
somebody
and
has to
make that
figure out the
happen?
how, though.
Someone
I'm
has
asking
to,
is it this group?
somebody has to take this and,
Several of us have worked on another study group and nothing happened. And so we want to ensure that that isn't the case with this one, or very little happen.
Identify the resources needed to implement.
I agree with Paulette.
Okay, so this is really helpful because it also helps that in establishing the recommendations, that accountability is one of those key pieces and needs to be punched out, correct?
Okay, so
You can say it.
what if the mayor's office takes the lead in creating the interactive map with ITS and we just start there? Can we work our way up to a single portal?
I don't know. I think that's what you have to figure out, Brian. I don't think you piece it.
Because we're not gonna,
I don't think you piece it. Somebody's got to, I really think it's going to get lost unless somebody owns it. That's mine.
And I guess I mean, we have a TIF section on our website, on the MDHA website currently, that has the application and some other materials. Obviously, we can add to, I don't control the website, so I don't know, Joe doesn't either, but obviously, I mean, that is a page that is dedicated to TIF. And obviously, we could have a link there to all the materials that we've gathered. I don't know how you continue to update those, but maybe you look for those opportunities. The interactive map, while maybe ITS and you work with them to create it, can also be there. And just like right now on the Metro website, on every board, agency, you're just pointing them back to their various websites. And so I think you have just one aggregate TIF website that just gets pointed to from someplace.
Yeah, I think all of this is doable. I think the mayor's office taking the lead on the interactive thing, and the same that same interactive map can have a link to the SharePoint that we've got.
Okay, pause for 1 second, I need to get processing. So I think under accountability, we might want to put in here as through the study group, we have established the following commitments. Do you see? Because some of it is a study group to be arrogant to say, and so therefore, boom, boom, boom. But it could be as a result of participating, the following parties have agreed to tackle this, and we'll put it under the accountability.
That would be good.
Is that good?
Yeah.
All right. Now, keep talking.
Well, fortunately, I don't know if we've got decision-making authority here, but we're close. Yeah, so mayor's office puts together the interactive map. There is a link there to the SharePoint with the information. MDHA's website points to that same place, the map and the materials. And as far as we've gotten so far, that's a lot of it, not all of it.
And so before this report goes, are you in a position to say, yeah, we can do that?
we can do the interactive map, yeah.
Okay. Anything with MDHA, you're at a point to say, yeah, we can do that?
Sure it can.
Yeah, I mean, yes,
Yeah, just
Yeah.
links right now.
right.
Yeah, cool, because I think that allows you to understand kind of, and as a result of the study group, these are also some of the actions we are going to take,
Absolutely.
regardless of how the other recommendations are adopted.
Right, and so the one still hanging out there is the create a single portal for information.
That is-
My understanding was that one of the things we've talked a lot about is trying to kind of depoliticize information and just have it be information. And I don't know that having a single portal, well, first of all, I don't know what subsequent information is, but I don't know that having a single portal living in the mayor's office accomplishes that goal. So I think that needs more discussion.
Well, I guess I either have that, I was either thinking that it's the portal we've created to date, really, right? With all that
Right.
information, with all our minutes, videos, et cetera. I don't know why we couldn't just let that live.
Oh, so portal, so you're using that synonymously with the SharePoint, the SharePoint
Right.
site. Oh, okay, sorry, I misunderstood. Okay,
So people can get to,
okay, then I think that's fine.
And I think on the MDHA website, we could point back to that to say for additional information on TIF and the work of the TIF study committee from 2019, 2018, 2019, et cetera.
Okay.
does that make sense?
Didn't I read in some of the materials about posting some historical information too and making that widely available, as in the existing agreements and things like that, all of that being readily available?
I think that's all in the SharePoint.
Okay, I'm just trying to, because I was back here on this board agenda stuff, and I don't,
Oh, I mean, I'm not interested in going backwards.
I'm just
It
asking.
can just be going forward.
Okay?
Good?
Yeah, and I think the stuff we're working on.
Because that
now,
was
the
in some of the
easy stuff,
comments.
It is.
Educate, communicate, show, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's, it's gonna be when we start having to take action, that it's gonna
Okay,
be much harder.
we got this?
Yeah.
And in a section, do you just want to call, so do you want to use the T word, transparency? Or do you want it to be communication and education? The whole thing should be transparent, right?
Well, if we're not going to have some kind of a statement about a commitment to transparency in all of the operations
People will be
and activities,
disappointed.
then I think we haven't fulfilled our mission.
So that should be kind of an overarching piece,
Yeah,
not a
I
separate
think so.
piece. Does that make sense? Okay.
Is it,
So this just helps us as we bring this back in. Okay.
can we add that here then under the established commitment?
Yeah. Say what you said again. Say again what you just said.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Oh. I think I said, but I'm not sure. Basically, I was saying that there's a commitment to transparency that should feed into every aspect of what we're doing regarding TIF and the work of this committee.
So one of your key recommendations is moving forward. Transparency is essential too, yes?
Mhm.
Okay. Got that enough, Rachel? All right. So policies and, process and policies.
We skipped the periodic TIF 101.
Oh, I did do that, thank you. Thank you, sir. Hold periodic TIF 101 education sessions.
Yeah, I think we all have felt that that's a pretty important piece of the puzzle, because we've figured out that while a bunch of us were fairly knowledgeable, nobody really understood all components of it, and the number of people in town who understand comprehensively about TIF is just not very many people. And so we haven't figured out how often, but the idea of MDHA and Metro going out and educating.
Is that routine? We talked about whether or not that was like, would be an annual kind of symposium, just invite people to come to, or is it more workshop structured, where people come in and you teach them how to apply? What is it?
I think both and.
I
I
mean,
think it's both.
Yeah, because I think there's something for the developers and I think there's something for the general public.
So there are two different audiences.
One of the reasons we were convened was that there were a lot of misperceptions and misunderstandings. And so how we overcome that, I think, is through an ongoing process of community education. There's also a concern in terms of our reason for being was that it was an insiders club and it wasn't readily available, or TIF loans were not readily available. And so again, that's a whole different thing than just the public knowing.
Could the recommendation be to create a series of classes or
A series of targeted sessions.
Targeted sessions for specific audiences, something to.
I think that's an
Okay.
important concept, Paul, that there be both kind of a
Series.
general education thing for people who just want to understand this process better, and then kind of a geeky technical thing for people who actually want to come and apply for a
Workshop.
so
Workshop topics.
what do y'all feel about suggesting that MDHA work with stakeholder groups? We could keep that loose or be specific to have once a year education session. I could imagine like a beginning part being the general stuff, and then have breakout sections of here's the banker stuff, here's the
Yeah.
developer stuff,
Exactly.
here's the small developer stuff.
I like that.
All right, I'm putting at a minimum. You don't want to limit.
Right.
At a minimum, you recommend that MDHA hold,
You good with that?
I'm good with that.
educate.
And I think MDHA is appropriate, but I think we need to have something, and others are appropriate experts, or I'm concerned about restricting it to, or identifying MDHA without anybody else.
You might
Just the
have bankers.
convener.
You might have bankers that are there, lawyers that are there.
Hold a so what I'm trying to help y'all get
So
to
you're trying to get the answer.
is where do you need to, where do you need to direct, sorry cameras, where do you need to direct people? You need to do this, 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 this. And where do you need to say, hey, we need this to happen, go make it happen.
Well, I mean, the easiest way to say it without having a big old list up there would be to duplicate the perspectives that we got in our study meetings that are in our various agendas.
Yeah, but that doesn't translate to the public, so.
I know, but, well, I don't know if any of us are going to be complete about it right now. You know, we talk to affordable housing people, we talk to bankers, we talk to big developers, we talk to small developers, we talk to Metro about and unfortunately, all these perspectives are necessary to understand it.
So I have a couple things, as you're looking at what your charge is. There's a couple different paths to go. You can make this really prescriptive. You can make it, at this point, even broad. And then the relevant parties could go back and identify what their commitment is to doing this, and it can be part of your report. Do you see? So that if you guys come back together and say, hey, yeah, we are willing to engage. Do you see what I'm saying?
So would it be that task everybody to do all this, and then 4 months from now, 3 months from now, they come back and we reconvene? And
No, I was actually thinking, as you're presenting this report, as you're presenting your recommendations, part of that presentation is, and through this process, the bodies that have been involved have agreed to do this. So it becomes embedded.
okay.
I'd
Talk
just
to
say,
me.
where you've got whole periodic TIF 101 education, I'd just say work with stakeholder and community groups to hold, and just let that be the bullet point.
For now,
Yeah.
for today.
Work with stakeholder and community groups to hold periodic TIF 101 education sessions. Do you want to have MDHA and Metro there as responsible parties?
There's lots of
I
stakeholders.
envision MDHA taking the lead on that,
Mhm.
but I think it's fine to have MDHA and Metro.
So what I keep hearing from you a little bit is one of the values of even being in this room, many values, but some of it's how do you keep making visible the relationship between MDHA and Metro? How do you keep doing that moving forward? So the more you can
Agreed.
put it in your report, the more other people will see that as well. Good?
Good.
Cool. Check, 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 check. Okay. All right. Policies, process and policies. Improved methodology for estimating, communicating the amount of TIF capacity needed. Improve the contract with an independent third party to help with this task when a new district is created or an existing district plan is amended.
Those
I think
qualifiers are important.
Say that again?
The qualifiers
Add
that
the
you
whole
just
thing?
read are important.
How are we defining capacity?
How many dollars?
The amount of TIF that can, yeah. Right.
TIF capacity would be dollars, isn't it?
What are you thinking?
I don't know, I'm trying to think of the math. My head goes to the math. I don't know what the answer.
Yeah. Okay, so
Yeah.
here's the weird one. So if I'm asking you, it's like, so what do you mean by improve the methodology?
Yeah,
How do
what
you
does that
improve
It's
it?
a little vague.
Yeah, was it?
What did you say, Richard?
It's a little vague.
Well, what we mean is that the city's attempt to get a Donaldson Transit-Oriented Development District last summer failed because, in large part, because Metro Finance was unable to say that they agreed with MDHA's methodology and numbers on predicting how much tax increment would be created. And some council person also disagreed with it. And so that's what's motivated it, is the,
So then actually, your recommendation may be contract with an independent third party to help improve the methodology
That's
for
right.
estimating.
Yeah. Because if you get that, then you don't even need
The third party actually
that.
does the work, not improve the
Right, then you don't
methodology.
even,
It doesn't?
It's a research question, right? I mean, how much
Yeah.
TIF capacity should,
Right, so it's not improving the
it's,
methodology.
yeah, doing the analysis.
It's doing the analysis.
Ah.
with the third party.
So is it to contract with a third party to conduct the analysis?
When you are,
it says impact analysis.
What?
Is it conduct the analysis?
That's what it
or
says.
No, right here.
analysis?
That's what she's got written up there.
Oh, I thought we were on the,
First
No, we
one.
just went, there's
Well,
another.
But there's that third party.
Okay, so,
I mean, somewhere in one of those, it said either a local university person, and
Right.
we used to have another group in there that somebody struck out. I
Council
don't know.
government or regional planning, one of those
yeah,
two.
so the difficulty is here, there's more than one way to skin the cat. And I think we're probably uncomfortable committing to telling the world the one way to skin the cat. The problem is that there wasn't consensus that the the methodology was reliable.
so let me ask you a question.
Well, do we,
If finance and MDHA had walked in hand and said, this is what we think the numbers are, would you have felt comfortable, or would council have felt comfortable enough moving forward, or would they have wanted an
Is it-
independent third party?
is
to
it
look
develop a
at it?
consensus methodology between finance and MDHA?
So to answer, there are two questions in there. For me, it would have depended on.
Well, not for you.
But for me, it would have depended on the explanation. But like literally on the floor of the council,
Yeah, it's like that.
the answer from finance was no, and then it lost by one vote. And so I do think that if finance and MDHA had both said, this is credible, it probably would have passed. I mean, it would make me, like, I would be satisfied. And if MDHA and finance said, gee, we don't know how to figure this out without somebody giving us some consulting, then I trust that they would go do it.
Is that maybe, it's not improve
Because that's
methodology, but
I mean,
develop consensus methodology?
It
Finance
sounds like
and
where we're coming out. I
MDHA,
thought
that's
we
what
were
we're saying.
Going towards
We
saying
agree
if it's
to what the
above a certain
methodology's
size, you have to
gonna
have a
be.
third party.
so there were two different recommendations. Let me come down here and then come back to there. One was to contract with a third party to complete a fiscal impact analysis for TIF loans exceeding a certain amount.
Right.
Somebody put in $3 million.
Okay.
So that'd be like a mandatory requirement.
For anything more than 3 million. Okay.
I mean, I think that would increase the public confidence immensely.
Okay, I'm fine with that. But then the other thing is just, I think the way Talia said it, for finance and MDHA to work together,
To create a consensus methodology.
right?
In the first one for a district, the second one is for an individual loan.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, good point.
So what she's writing is for the first bullet point.
Yeah.
Create a consensus methodology by Metro and MDHA for,
Yeah.
finish my sentence.
Creation of a TIF district.
And new. Yeah.
That's it.
Yes?
I'm looking at Joe. You good with that?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Taking this off then. This one.
Yes.
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 Thank you. Cool. Conduct a periodic review of goals and capacity of each district.
I think in the second one on the right-hand side, it ought to be impact analysis for individual TIF loans. Exceeding.
Very good.
Yes? Thank
There you go.
Conduct a periodic review of goals and capacity for each district, including existing districts. Is that TIF districts?
Yes.
I know you all know it,
technically
but
redevelopment districts.
Redevelopment.
Redevelopment.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Including existing redevelopment districts, correct?
Yep.
Good?
Okay.
All right, if I start moving faster than you need me to,
Well-
just back me off.
So on
And is that accountability?
that one, on that one of the observations, recommendations was a specific process, not like after 10 years and then every 5 years after. And I didn't see anybody scratch that out.
Right.
And if there's not disagreement on the specific,
Periodic review at 5 and 10 years?
Yeah.
Or 10 years in the first 10 years and every 5
Yeah.
years thereafter.
I think that fits accountability, though. You think that fits accountability?
And so who are we directing
In
that
terms of
recommendation to? Who was
Council.
going to do that review?
oh,
Well, then we got a whole lot of who's up here.
Wouldn't that be MDHA because but
Well-
they need to report and do?
I don't know.
It's kind of like checking in.
You know, the MDHA would report that to the council. It's,
yeah. I mean, I liked it the way I had it written.
Okay, one of the
Where's that piece of paper? What did you do to it?
Periodically assess impact and goals of redevelopment district. Recommendations doing this after first 10 years of a district and 5 years ever after, which is under accountability. Are these the
Okay.
same thing?
Yes, they are the
Yes.
same
Can I
thing.
take
Yeah.
this one off and move it over there?
I think so.
I think it does. I think
As
it
long
fits
as
over
you use
here.
the
The
exact
right, as
language.
long as you use the right word.
I mean, all joking aside, the rest of that about requiring agreement between the council and MDHA.
Wait a
in or-
second. Whoa, do not go there. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh, I see.
Okay.
Sorry, Bob. Never mind.
Like on cue, I get a voice message from the legal director. I mean, the rest of that is,
I asked him to call you. I know work, your wife will be next.
the rest of that's important.
Okay.
So, hold on, can I work this? What you're really saying is assess impact and goals of a redevelopment district after the first 10 years of a district and every 5 years after. That's the recommendation. Yes, not periodically reassess, it is assess impact,
Correct.
Right, we agree. Yes.
right? Okay. Assess impact and goals of a redevelopment district after
First.
the first 10 years. I'm just doing this so I can make sure I come back to it. And every 5 years after that. Yes?
Yep.
Okay, after that. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. That one comes off.
That's not all that Bob wants to say in that, I don't think.
Right, the rest of that, and that
Is it-
matters.
Yeah.
And, so keep
He
going.
wants the council and MDHA to agree on that assessment.
Just like when a redevelopment district is created, council and MDHA agree on goals and the amount of TIF spending to have. And my recommendation is that just like there's the agreement at the beginning, that we make sure that there's agreement at 10 years and thereafter in order to keep utilizing the district. I think
And I think,
We'll
I
reach
think I
that
added
agreement.
something in there about the mayor's office needs to be part of that agreement. Or something.
they're not part of it to start it.
I'm just saying. I just put in a question. Where's the mayor
Can I
and,
ask a
where's the
question
mayor
about
and,
the
where's the mayor in this agreement?
Keep going, yeah. All
Well,
right,
you
so
see,
one of the
veto-
questions is,
veto
does the
power.
mayor's
Veto power.
office? Yes?
Excuse me?
One of the questions is, does the mayor's office need to be part of this?
The mayor's office automatically is with his veto power.
But how can the mayor influence it before it gets to veto stage? That's just a question.
Yeah.
Well, and if
From a policy
MDHA and the
perspective.
council can agree, does it just stay like it is?
No, that's my point is
Or
that
have to be reauthorized?
this recommendation is useless if disagreement means status quo.
Okay.
If disagreement means status quo, then we can be assured of disagreement. And
So how do you make this
Maybe
recommendation in
not.
something that doesn't, because that's exactly what that
Here's that
says.
three-legged stool.
What's that?
That's what that says.
And
If
you
they don't
want to
agree,
remove the whole thing.
then
That's
nothing
I think what Bob wants it
No.
to say is, in essence, it sunsets unless MDHA and Metro agree to extend it.
Continue go.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. That's what he wants it to
And
say.
maybe
I get-
every,
Go ahead.
and maybe every 5 years, maybe.
Every 7, 10
Yeah, something
after
like
that,
I
every
mean,
10.
Somewhere where they're looked at and reviewed, and with that financial caveat that they extend long enough, whatever the rights are for the.
Yeah, I've always in the back of my head not been entirely sure about the 5 thereafter, so maybe.
Rolls around pretty quick, frankly.
Do you want me to put a range in there? Do you want me to put a number or a range?
I'd be okay with every 10.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's
That's a
right.
good compromise. Hey, Bob, if the council woke up next month and decided they wanted to pay.
That's
half-
no inference about it.
No, but I mean, but if there was a move afoot next month to take a development district and essentially to say, MDHA, you can make no more loans in that district, does the council have the ability to do that?
No. But, and so part of the thing is that, that I think is underappreciated and frankly creates this disconnect where the public feels out of touch with them after 20, 30, 40 years, is after it's created, there is no ability for the council to, and therefore the people, to influence it. It's fire and forget. It's off forever. And so the idea of, and the idea that we all are unanimous on reassessing after the 10 years is the idea of goals change. What you want to do in the Gulch in the first 10 years is different than what you want to do in the Gulch in the second 10 years. And doing the check-in to get the very public consensus for it. Like, if we all went back to the Gulch after 10 years and reassessed, that would continue on, and with slightly different goals. And instead of widespread complaining, we'd have, we just all agreed a couple of years ago to shift the goals from this a little bit toward this.
And I'll tell you what's interesting, I think in practice, that is what's happening, the goals are changing. Like you
Right.
couldn't, if you went down to MDHA, I would bet you couldn't get a TIF for X.
I totally agree.
But they're changing without, and I think having the public discussion,
Right.
approval, thought is helpful.
I agree.
Yeah.
I've got one other thing I haven't talked about, but there are a couple of, some of the problems we have are the limitations of the state statute. I mean, like all statutes, it says some things and it doesn't say some other things. One of the things I find a little bit troubling is the way the process works now. The statute says the MDHA board has to adopt a plan for redevelopment district, and then you have to send it to council, have a public hearing, the council has to approve it. The council frequently will make changes in what MDHA proposed, and there isn't some concept like a conference committee between the House and Senate where you work that out.
I think Joe would tell you when those changes happen at the council level, it bounces back to the MDHA
Okay.
board for approval.
Well, I was going to say it should happen, but I'm not sure it always does.
It doesn't always. It has not always done that. And we have looked at it sometimes to see if it's substantive.
Right.
Because a lot of times we deem it not to be substantive, and therefore doesn't.
Well, I just wonder if the process shouldn't be, if the council wants to make changes, that it basically responds to MDHA and says, we're prepared to approve this with the following 3 changes, and let their board adopt the plan so that both groups have adopted the same plan. Because I could see there being some confusion when the MDHA board adopts one plan and the council adopts another.
Yeah, what I meant in the way, and I don't know whether I conveyed it successfully, but the idea should be that in order to, you do the 10-year review and then 10 years after that, that just like at the front end, both bodies have to agree about the goals in order to
Right.
keep doing.
I think that would also solve one problem we have now, which is the statute doesn't say how you terminate a district. And so I think the safe way to do it would be the same way you create one. Have the MDHA board say, we want to terminate this district, and the council say, we agree we're going to terminate this district. I think what you come up with is a methodology to do that, in essence. You're making it happen automatically with the default being it's going to terminate it unless both groups agree to continue. But I think the safest approach is for both groups to act
I think,
Well, let's be clear though. I mean, 'cause I think you guys are saying, what you just said is not what that says. I mean, you made sort of an implicit statement about a sunset unless this happens.
I think that's what Bob's recommendation is, right?
Well, that's different than what's up there. That just says, assess the impact and goals.
This says no, require MDH council to agree.
Yeah.
One at the bottom.
But
That's part of it, that goes right after.
require to, in order for new TIF loans to
Loans.
continue being made in districts.
Okay.
sunset's the wrong word because that would imply the district goes away.
Right.
And we can't make the district go away because
gotta
the
service
old
existing
loans are
loans.
still going to be getting
You just would
serviced.
put more money into it.
It's just about whether it's
Right.
new
Each
loans
would make
keep
new
going.
loans.
Right.
Although I think as a practical matter, there's a finite amount of dollars in here, and eventually you run out of dollars.
Well, there's actually terms on every single one of these has a specific term.
Right, but it's 30 years to start.
Okay, I'm coming back, let's
And they
get
get
into a 10.
extended.
I need you
Okay.
to get out of the weeds.
And they get extended.
Yeah.
And they get
Is that all right?
extended,
I agree.
but this
Okay.
would be,
Thank you. So the fact is let's work together to make sure that you're moving on this, that's what this says. Let's make sure we're working together to make sure we're on the same path, let's make it visible, yes? Cool. Okay, I'm coming back here. Brian, come here. Here,
I'm there.
here.
I can do two things at one time.
Obtain an independent third-party analysis of any revenue increment project prior to creating an entire district.
I think,
Is that redundant?
I think we got that, right?
yeah, I mean, we decided in the blue over here to create a consensus methodology for the creation of a new TIF district.
right, so you can scratch that
Right
one
here?
out, right?
I just,
No, the one above
The
it.
first one.
First one.
Oh, that was
That's
bad.
duplicate.
Sorry. Establish a policy to, we don't want to do that. Establish the policy to evaluate the percent of tax increment used for loans in an entire district TIF zone.
okay, so we had a pretty scribbled piece of paper, and that's the one that started with me and Brian and Paulette and ended up at us. And we think the big blue writing from me and whoever wrote in black pen, were saying something different than that. And I don't know about whether the third writer was saying something different than that. What we were trying to say was that we set a standard amount and then have a policy, a standard percentage of increment that can be used for TIF loans, and then have a policy that describes circumstances which would argue in favor of increasing or decreasing that percentage for specific circumstances. And I thought two of the three different pens agreed with that. I don't know about the third.
Yes?
I agree with that if it's project by project. I don't know
Establish
if
a
I might have
policy to
been,
evaluate the
because you're
percentage of
establishing the
tax
policy.
increment used for loans in an entire district.
Because I do agree a
TIF
policy
zone.
is needed.
Yeah.
You're using the phrase entire district to distinguish it from parcel by parcel.
I don't, that one is definitely not me. Establish a
That's the title.
policy.
Establish a strong policy to limit the percent of tax increment.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
so where Brian and I ended up is that one is, think about it this way, instead of being a standalone recommendation, that is one of the reasons to deviate on a different
Why don't you just
recommendation.
read the,
The first version?
no, what we came up with, the compromise version,
Yeah.
I would call it.
What Brian and I came up with was there should be a standard percent of tax increment available for loans as part of a policy that includes circumstances to allow exceeding the standard to accomplish specific goals like affordable housing, and circumstances where you would reduce the percentage depending on the size and scope of a loan or district. So like full district TOD would be a reason that you might decide to argue in favor of using a lower percentage than the standard you establish. So making up numbers, if you said 75% of the increment is the typical standard to go to loans, but if you're offering affordable housing, we're willing to think about more. If it's a full district, we go lower. That is a standard with policy that describes circumstances to go higher or lower.
I think that's what that says. Is that not what that says?
Establish a policy to evaluate the percentage of tax increment used for loans in the entire district.
Yeah, but I'm saying that I'm going to go pass legislation that says a number that establishes a standard. And so I don't know whether we would have agreement around what the standard would be.
Are you going to do
I don't know
that?
if the percent will fit necessarily every project. That's my hesitation. I don't know if you could have a fixed percent.
Well, no, that's not, I don't
Is
think that's
that-
what you're saying, right?
Yeah, the
That's
idea is,
how I read it. I read it as if we were going to.
right, but then there's a policy that gives you reasons to go higher or
Oh,
lower.
Lord,
You have some variation.
I'm the one that was writing all that. No. Is
Yeah,
there?
I
'Cause
have
I
a
didn't think it had
very,
any flexibility.
there's a whole different thing in my mind, Bob, that if you take that and say, hey, TIF committee said we ought to have a number, my number is 60%, and the recommendation was policy, and let's go get it done. I would have a problem with that being done that way. I think that
Because?
because I think that it then in a sense becomes an arbitrary policy while it's going through council and you get discussion. I think the level of knowledge that those folks have got about that is not enough to give them a good sense of whether 50 is the right number or 60 or 90. So I'm concerned about how that gets established, although I'm fine with council having an educated discussion and moving that forward.
Yeah.
I think they're
That's a
two
tough-
different,
that's a tough-
they're two different issues.
I would hate to see the council doing it on a case-by-case basis. I think you've got a lot of danger of inconsistencies.
Well, the council would never be doing the deciding.
Okay,
Who would?
who would?
I mean, that's got to be MDHA.
Okay.
So would
And
India,
the policy's got to be MDHA.
So this is, you're suggesting
say
NDHA
75.
establish a policy.
Right, in my ideal world, the plans would be amended to set a cap, a standard amount of increment. And we've already we know it's not higher than 85% because the city law doesn't allow using more than 85% of the increment right now. And so the plans would state the standard, and it would be subject to policies that I'd be willing to trust MDHA to, right now, I mean, you guys got stuff you figure out, but it's not written down, it's not formal, it's not to the public. If it's a smaller loan, that leans toward higher. If it's a bigger loan, it leans toward lower. If they're doing other stuff the city likes, like affordable housing, that leans toward higher. I mean, there's stuff you guys, MDHA is doing that that's not visible to the universe. And if the plans were amended to say 75% is a standard, or 70, Chattanooga's got even lower than that standard that I would love for us to agree to. I don't know if we can. But the plans also say that MDHA would establish a written policy that will define circumstances where it tends to push up, tends to push down. It still leaves the subjective flexibility within that standard. It leaves you guys having to defend how come this one's 80 and this one's 60. But you guys are doing that in
a now transparent way.
in a heuristic manner rather than pursuant to
So
a
is this
policy.
establish and communicate a policy, or is this communicate the policy?
There is not a policy. It feels like.
Establish and
So
communicate.
would it be MDHA shall establish?
Well, the difference is the lender that's in here. And so the lender is accepting 100% of the increment, even though it may be amortized over 15 years, it pays off at 12 because they're taking 100% or 85% of the increment. So the bank has been pledged all the increment that is generated, and it pays off a lot quicker, you pay less interest. So you got that argument going into it. So what I hear you saying is you're requesting that we hit an amortization table, and we're not pledging it, and then we would base everything off of, and our payment would actually would be a fixed amount, and it would never fluctuate up if property values go up, in the amount of property taxes they come.
My interest is, like, right now, it's only allowed to pledge 85% of the increment.
Correct.
Because the other 15% approximately stays with Metro. And I think there's community interest in having that number set somewhere other than 85%. But I understand, and we've talked about a whole bunch of reasons why it should be different for different kinds of projects that I accept.
I have another question, Bob. You've got another piece of legislation that, in addition to the 15% for debt service, would carve out the school district funds, which is 40-something%.
Yeah.
Is this in addition to that?
I mean, I'm trying to be the most polite team member ever. I mean, it would be my intention if we reach a compromise that I wouldn't pursue that legislation.
Okay. I was just trying to clarify.
We need to kind of come back and see where we are with this one.
Okay.
MDHA to establish and communicate a policy to evaluate the percentage of tax increment used for loans in an entire district.
And reasons to increase or decrease that.
To establish a policy to evaluate.
They're going to establish a percentage, but there's going to be some hydraulics that let you go up or down in certain situations, right? So
Yeah.
Is this based on?
and criteria for increasing or decreasing that amount. Is that right?
Well, it establishes a standard,
Right.
not a policy to evaluate. I mean, it establishes a policy with a standard, right? Because wouldn't the standard be part of the?
Yeah, instead of to evaluate, establish a policy to establish.
With a standardized percentage
Right.
of the tax increment.
Yeah.
Establish a policy with a standardized percentage
Strike evaluate.
of the tax increment.
Standardized
Percentage of the tax increment. So you've got that used
Standardized
for loans.
here. MDHA to communicate and to establish and communicate a policy with a standardized percent, yes, of the tax increment. Is the rest of this correct? In an entire district. And criterion
For
for
increase.
increasing and decreasing
Yeah,
the
okay.
percentage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
By that, you're really meaning every TIF loan. Is that the way I'm reading that?
Well, like every new one going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should I just say, does this help describe it or confuse it?
Can you read it again? I'm sorry.
Come on, Bob, can't you do that? MDHA to establish and communicate a policy with a standardized percentage of tax increment used for loans in an entire TIF district and criterion for increasing or decreasing the percentage.
Oh, so I get your question now. It's instead of the entire district needs to go away, and this just applies to all TIF loans. Right, guys?
How's that? Yes? Used for TIF loans.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
And then the only other thing is that I'm anticipating that we'll do plan amendments to establish a standard, not MDHA making up the standard.
Say that again?
MDHA is not going to make up the standard number. That's something that
It'll
should
be written into the
be
plan.
collaborative, MDHA and the council, in amending the redevelopment plans to include a standard.
So is this a whole nother recommendation?
The redevelopment district plans will be amended to establish. Is
Yeah,
that
that's just the lead-in, I think.
right?
Yeah.
Redevelopment plans.
The redevelopment district plans, I think this is what Bob, so
Go
correct.
ahead.
Will be amended to establish.
Yeah,
And
then
then
you pick up
everything
your-
else is the same.
your second
above.
point.
Thank you.
And is that the same standard in every district? Or do we need a whole separate 3-hour meeting for that?
I mean, I've thought about that, and I think you could make the arguments, both ways. I would prefer to have a standard that is applicable across all the districts and have the policy broad enough to, I would expect that a district that has more affordable housing going into it would typically be above the standard more regularly than one that you're trying to accommodate infrastructure development.
I agree with that approach. I think that's the.
We good?
Yes.
Okay. And
How
actually,
you holding up, Liz?
huh? I'm great. We're not leaving till these are done. Did y'all understand? You always use time as your ally. Yeah. So what you want to keep figuring out is how do you create a set of recommendations that have a life to them, that just doesn't deal with a situation that's come up, but also, right, is proactive. Okay. Ensure that all applicable policies that apply to MDHA also apply, not should, but also apply to IDB, TIF also?
I like where Brian came down on this one. I mean, and Liz, for background, IDB has done one TIF loan ever in the history of humanity, but one would expect there would be more going forward. And so sort of because there's been limited involvement with them on TIF, they haven't really been a part of this discussion. And so I think we've all got a generalized sense of, yeah, the stuff we're coming up with should apply to them, but they're a different beast. They don't have staff. They've never done more than one loan. And so Brian had worded the language something along the lines of asking IDB to look at this and make recommendations about how to, something.
Yeah, we can't sort of,
So then maybe the
can't expect a blanket
recommendation is to
apply.
engage with IDB.
Yeah, we
That's what
changed
the
that a little bit,
recommendation
too.
is, as opposed to, do you see what I'm
So
saying?
that.
We changed that as well.
Engage with IDB so that.
Yep. Yeah, we
That's what
changed
Sure.
it
Because
because
legally, I
they
don't
haven't
think,
been
I'm not
involved
sure
in
you
those.
can you legally?
No,
Can't make.
or
them.
practically.
Yeah.
So,
You should just ask them.
Oh, their IDBs have to come through the council.
Oh,
so,
they do.
I mean, I would expect their board could look at what we recommend and then react to it and report back.
So in terms of a recommendation, what, that's what I'm asking. So it seems to me that your recommendation is to say, let's engage with them around this conversation as opposed to do this.
Yeah.
That's what
Yes.
you're describing.
Sure.
That's fine.
Okay. Engage with IDB to coordinate, to ensure?
No, I mean, I think we're just asking them to
Consider.
respond,
I was gonna
consider
say,
and respond to
To
what
solicit
we're
their
recommend-
responses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Who's their lawyer now? Is Teague still
Like I
their
said,
lawyer?
to solicit their responses to the recommendations, and I guess,
This is on a different one, and we had put in here, that's not up here yet. And we put something to the effect that they,
So,
the IDB should review this group's recommendations and report and evaluate TIF, I'm trying to read the notes here. Come on, writer. TIF collaboration opportunities, processing collaboration
That sounds right.
opportunities. Does that sound right? But we were also trying to get to the same place under this recommendation.
Hey, y'all,
Words are off,
so
but we were trying to get to the
It's
same
not a
place.
recommendation. It's a suggestion, it's a something,
Yeah.
it's a hope, it's a. you know what I'm saying?
aspiration.
Right.
You can
Because you
disagree
can't
with
make
what
them,
I'm
you
saying.
can just say, here, this is
you're
what we
saying.
did,
It's like,
please
hey,
play.
let's figure out how we coordinate efforts, or,
Yeah.
right?
Evaluation.
And you don't want to put it in the form of this is what I'm hearing is, you'd much rather have it as a suggestion or an introduction or an engagement.
Please review this and play along.
Yeah, that's fine.
Ask.
Sure.
Although Bob's right, if they don't do that, they may not get approved by council. So there is some kind of
Check and balance.
instruction that
I feel confident if we do it the
We
way Liz
encourage?
is suggesting. I'm sure they're going to be plenty responsive
Yeah.
to.
How about we encourage?
Encourage.
encourage.
That's
How's
good.
that?
Yeah.
To review,
Yes, we encourage, and we'll put that in, and you can figure out what part. Okay.
Jen's your house. Just the chair.
You got that? Yep. All right.
I'm good with you.
Develop a process for evaluating and reporting the impact of each redevelopment district every 5 years.
That's baked
There you
into
have it.
that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm loving this. Designate mayor's office and ECD to receive all applications for all economic incentives rather than having multiple, it looks like hands, but I know
Points of entry.
it's ports of entry.
Yeah.
But that was fun.
Yeah, so I was the one who threw out the big bold suggestion of standalone office. I think the consensus is that that's outside our purview and maybe not feasible. And so the idea of the designation and then there's sort of air traffic controlling, getting inquiries to the right agencies is, I think we've got consensus around that.
You know, if you think about it, somebody, as I'm listening to all of this, and sometimes recommendations are somebody going, oh yeah, I got this, check, check, check. Other ones, recommendations spark people to think about how to do it, right? And what I'm hearing is yours is a blend. It's not, this is all, here's what you need to do, here's how you need to do it, and here's when you need to do it. That's not what's coming across to you. Okay.
I just wanted to say one thing about
Yeah.
that. And the fact that we think it's not plausible, I think somehow we at least need to put something in there about the desire or the ideal way of or in the absence of a standalone ECD office or department. Something like that would make me more comfortable.
If
It's not, it's different than what this says?
No, it says designate mayor's office and ECD, and we don't really have an office of ECD or department. And I'm just saying, we have basically a 1 and a fraction, or maybe 2 people.
It's true.
3.
Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean that they are properly staffed today. That gets back to the resource question.
Well, and maybe what the two of y'all are saying is, in the best of all possible worlds, we would set up something that's independent of Metro Council and the mayor's office and all these things that takes care of all those incentives, and I think that's what I hear you saying.
I would just like a parenthetical statement that says, in the absence of a well-resourced and fully staffed department or whatever of economic development or incentives or whatever you want to call it, this is what we do. That's all I'm asking.
And I don't mean anything by asking this question, but why do you think that's a superior way to do it?
Brian said so.
No, and I think,
Sorry,
And I-
you
and I-
respond first.
couple of things. We've been looking at anti-displacement nationally, and we're one of 10 cities. And what has been very apparent and glaringly obvious is the places where they've made the most progress in this aspect, anti-displacement, and some of it has included incentives and tips, et cetera, they have a fully staffed office or department dedicated to them. Here we had like 4 or 5 volunteers, and like Philadelphia, this was just a fraction of what they had like 10 people that were addressing it, and they've done a lot more than we have.
Okay. So you're trying to meet some other goals other than just efficiently hand out TIF.
I'm saying that the way we hand out TIF is impacted
Right.
by the lack of staffing
Right.
and a department or somebody
Okay.
dedicated or somebody's dedicated to it.
That wasn't obvious to me from discussion we had, so
and
that's helpful.
I'm glad for the question, because that really narrows in on my interest in it too. I'd make the argument that it's at least possible that some of the perceived opaqueness is by the public is the fact that we don't really have a one-stop shopping place, you know, who's in charge of this, and instead it's some people in town kind of know, go talk to them for this and
Yeah.
this other group for this other thing. That's really where the idea came from in my head. But I agree with Paulette that we wouldn't have consensus on making that for a recommendation. So the idea of absent having a setup like that, having the mayor's office as the intake and air traffic control, it makes sense.
I know that time is short, but is what you're saying, much like we got a Department of Public Works, much like we've got a Department of this, there ought to be a Department of Economic Development and Senate, just that's working in a whole set of things?
Yeah, and I think I jumped in front of Brian. I think Brian was going to talk about.
No, the only thing I was going to say, there are pros and cons to every setup.
Sure.
Clearly, these conversations have become more public and more complicated when it comes to economic development. I think there's much more community interest than maybe there was in the past. That's only natural as a city grows.
Yeah.
And at some point, we have to talk about capacity. And I think one of the goals of this group has been to figure out ways to improve transparency and confidence in the decisions that are made. And so having only a couple staff members in the mayor's office trying to handle a large volume of work may not, there are downsides to that setup.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's wrong or bad, it's just there are downsides to it.
Well, I really hadn't understood Paulette's point until today. I mean, I thought the only context in which I've heard affordable housing come up is, can we use TIF to do affordable housing? Which of course we can, but this is a completely different issue, and it's kind of the downside of growth. You drive up the prices of things and you price more people out of the market, and I get, having a group that takes that into account makes sense.
You might do one of two things. One might, it just says, in the absence of a well-resourced and fully staffed Department of ECD, is one way of saying it. The other one, if you agree with it, is to say, in the longer term, we would recommend the city exploring or adopting a department. And in the short term, we would recommend this.
I would go with in the long term exploring, but I don't feel super strongly about it.
What do you all think? One just says, hey, since we don't really have it, that's not what we're working on, here's what we need to do now.
When we
This is
started
what
talking
that
about making
says.
recommendations, we said we were probably going to make some immediate recommendations and some recommendations for further study and some things that are further out. And I think that's the category this falls into.
And I would also add that advocates for 4 years have been advocating for an office or department of housing. And so this is a little bit different, but it's the same kind of initiation of ideas, so it's the same thing. And I know when it was first broached to Mayor Berry, her response was she wasn't going to create any more bureaucracy.
Okay.
So, long-term, short-term?
How do you guys feel about the second idea? Like, I don't.
I mean, there's a scope question. If we're solely focused on TIF, I don't feel strongly about making a statement about long-term creating a standalone department. It doesn't give me a lot of heartburn to just put it in for now. It's a longer-term goal, and then we can see it in context of the rest.
I don't feel strong about either
and
way.
discuss it.
I'm still holding out for in the absence of, because I think that generates more discussion.
I think everybody's on board with
Yeah,
that.
let's put it that way for now.
All right.
Yeah, I can revise it.
And it will be in the absence of designate,
Yes.
just so you know that.
I think everybody's on board with that.
You know that, right? Okay. Prepare a streamlined process for smaller TIF loans with form documents and lower costs of borrowing.
This is another one where I like the way Brian said it in our group.
Brian gets to know.
Lower barriers of entry with education.
Yes, that was my phrase.
You might work in this kind of thing as a,
Yeah, so instead of prepare a streamlined process, I think that's much better said.
Yeah.
Lower barriers
yeah.
to entry for smaller TIF loans.
There's the question of the lower barriers of entry, and then there's a capacity building question.
Prepare
Yeah.
a streamlined process for
No,
lower
strike streamlined process, just lower barriers of entry for smaller TIF loans.
So the active word is lower,
Right.
really broad. That's right,
Yeah.
yes?
Yes.
Okay. Yes?
And,
Yeah.
and then there was the second, and I don't know if it's a second point or another way of saying it, but Brian made the point that we're capacity building, the number of smaller developers, diverse developers that are able to qualify for a TIF loan currently sits at, I think, 1.
No, it was actually part of, I think, this idea of having a yearly conference or workshop or something. It's along those same lines, right? I mean, help build capacity among a more inclusive group that could access the TIF program.
Capacity's not work, because I think about the dollars, and you're talking about,
No, not dollars.
Yeah,
No, I'm talking about,
yeah,
yep, I guess, yeah.
creating some,
Instead of
an
inclusive,
expanded,
I think it's
a more inclusive set of developers.
Diverse is the word.
Diverse, yeah.
Representative isn't as loaded.
Okay, you are
Representative.
actually then starting, this thing is about, that's interesting, because even your periodic from getting this is both about increasing communities' understanding, but also capacity, its ability,
Right.
right?
Right.
I think it should be written in there somehow.
So increasing understanding and
Capacity.
expanding capacity?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
It's that whole
Yeah.
scenario you talked about.
All right, you're looking at how to word that differently.
Expand pool of diverse applicants.
I think Paulette's got the right words on this, because we've,
Yeah, Paula.
it's the, what did you say?
Said representative.
Yeah, that applicants are representative of the community.
Okay.
And expanding representative, expanding applicants, they're representative of the community, how's that? Like you just said, like your
But you're
words. I
preparing
think those are
them.
good, okay.
You're preparing them to
Hey, we have
capacity
three more
building so
before we
they're
get to
better
accountability, we're
equipped
getting there.
to apply.
Establishing a tour program that would reduce or eliminate barrier in redevelopment districts where TIF is rarely considered and/or with smaller projects. Establish a tour program that would reduce or eliminate barriers in redevelopment districts where TIF is rarely considered and/or with smaller.
So
What's an example of a barrier that we've identified?
Well, this is, I think Charles Robert wrote this one, and this is the, having a product or a package, a document, something to get the transaction costs down, to make a smaller loan work.
Okay.
That could be the thing that's holding back the districts that aren't getting a lot of use.
So I'm more worried that the reason the districts aren't getting the use is there's not a demand for somebody to build a development that gets there. So I was worried that we were going to try to eliminate the demand barriers, and that felt like
No.
that was a lot. But if
maybe
it's,
instead of establish, it's evaluate.
but
But
Yeah, I think we need
the
to-
whole idea was something where you could potentially justify using TIF on a project of less than $1 million as opposed to.
So you want to go see if there's a tool or program out there to
But isn't that
use?
kind of what we did with the previous point? Lowering barriers of entry with foreign documents and lower cost of borrowing?
Is that an example?
Yes. Yeah.
but Charles Robert, aren't you really talking about districts that have been created that aren't being utilized effectively?
I think it's all of the above.
Okay.
Right? And I think it may be the same issue.
Do you want us to do that as a subset of the earlier one?
Won't we leave them both on there for now, and as we come closer to the final report, maybe they get combined?
Or maybe this one is, it's like evaluate the existence of barriers in redevelopment districts and possible means to reduce or eliminate them.
I'm fine with that. I mean, what we talked about was, or I guess maybe what we had mentioned is either in a district where it's not being widely used and/or on a smaller project where the developer cannot stand there as the guarantor, the borrower cannot stand there as the guarantor. And/or just the cost of hiring a law firm and going through the documents and all that, just doesn't make it worth it. Either you can't justify or you can't qualify. So there ought to be some way to narrow the gap on those.
So these both are, they're together.
They are definitely together.
Yeah.
Do we need to give any of those examples that you just highlighted? Because I think that's important, or is that making it too simplistic?
No, I mean, I think somebody reading this report cold would probably benefit from that explanation.
Because I think it was very important.
Yeah.
So try to figure out a way, like your two examples, it's either developer can't get the guarantee or the transaction costs are too high.
Right.
are the, when we say lower barriers to entry, those are the barriers
That's
we're
right.
talking
That's
about.
exactly right.
So you're suggesting that we like mention those two barriers, inability,
Yeah, and I agree with Paulette. I think we want to call that out so that, or with what Richard said, so that the
such as ability to sign a guarantee and,
Or to guarantee.
qualify as a guarantor.
yeah, there you go. Inability to qualify as a guarantor
Yeah, that's better.
or,
Reduce the cost.
Reduce the transaction cost. For a smaller loan.
Oh, it's easier to reduce the transaction cost. There's going to be financial risk associated with
Yeah.
substitute guarantors.
but that's, you know, if the city ever gets its revenue squared away, that, the guarantee thing, is,
In scope, in scope.
Okay, come with me.
Is the thing
Evaluate
that's-
the better bill
He's
after
got a
so many years
solution
to
for that.
determine application to the TIF projects.
Yep.
And what's
You
this?
know,
Paula, where do we end up on that one?
Which one now?
How
Evaluate
many
do
years?
better bill after so many years to determine application to TIF projects.
Oh, we didn't say any years, but we talked about 10, and I thought that was too many.
No. Well, maybe. I
think-
definitely agree it's too many.
I think what we talked about is that we needed some data from the Do Better bill before we could evaluate TIF against the Do Better bill,
But it looked to me that you potentially got
because we don't really have anything on that yet.
two issues there. As I understand the
Yeah.
current form of the Do Better deal, it's really geared toward an employer more so than a developer. Now, that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it can't be changed to do so. I think at the same time, we have to be mindful of the conversation we just had.
Right.
That if you layer in all these
Right,
requirements
right.
and you get it on a smaller project, you're gonna say, either I can't do this, or I can't even fill out the form.
So I had added that due to be responsive to our public hearing, where a couple people mentioned that. And the Do Better bill is going to change presumably, because it's been deemed not able to comply fully with it. So,
That was our thing, we don't know what.
yeah, I just don't know, like, if you filled in the blank and said after 1 year, 2 years, like, I don't, like, who's doing that evaluation?
But I think
We were just like, we don't know.
Talia made a good point, that maybe we have to,
Figure out if it's working first.
yeah, assess its progress, you
Yeah, how
know.
about instead of putting in a fixed number of years, after there's sufficient experience with the Do Better bill?
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, that's
Something to
exactly
that
it.
effect.
Yeah,
Because we don't know
Okay,
if
so-
it's working.
after there's sufficient experience with the Do Better bill.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rachel, go. After sufficient experience with the Do Better bill,
Yeah.
evaluate to determine.
Yes, and
Okay.
strike after
Period.
blank years.
Applicability
Thank you.
to TIF.
Okay, and then we have measure capacity and
Can you
market.
live with that?
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
What does
I think
it
it's
say
to the
again?
public.
Measure capacity and market.
I think that's
Redundant.
tossed overboard.
Yeah.
All right. Around accountability, so we have identify resources, okay. We have the assess, we already done that, establish the following commitments, mayor's office puts together maps, SharePoint
We did
links
that
from
already.
MDHA. The point, we had it from there, transparency is essential to the work, that kind of goes overarching, and require MDHA, well, we already did this.
Yep.
Y'all?
Yep.
That's
So
what,
what are the next steps, Mr. Chair?
Next steps.
oh, she's going to tell us next step.
Oh, okay.
We got 3 minutes left.
Let's expand it.
So the next piece, as I see fit, is we're going to go take this and put this into a coherent form of recommendations that you can use. Somebody else is collecting all the background materials.
So let's do an introduction real quick. Ed over here. Liz, have you guys met each other before?
Hi.
I've just seen your work.
That's dangerous. Thank you. Hi.
He's gonna put together, Ed is gonna put together the what is TIF part of it, and he's been at over almost all the meetings, a lot of the meetings, and so far we haven't swapped any ideas about exactly what goes into the what is TIF, how is TIF used, other than to say, we don't want to completely reinvent the wheel with the giant library we've got, and it's probably as far as we've gotten on it, but Ed's the guy.
So typically when we do these, one, you want to report unless, this is your report. You've seen them all different ways. My take is always you want to make it so it's usable. So the more concise you can make it, the more usable it is. And so typically there will be a little bit around the information around how often you've met, topics you've had, let people know that, and then given that, these are the set of recommendations. And likely they'll be anchored. I'm going to anchor in some different topics so people can see that. That's going to be the bulk of the report. Now, in that, you can have appendices with, participants, and, I mean, everything else can be in that. It can be as large as you want. But the heart of it is you want, particularly if it's going to become something that somebody else is going to use, you want it to be concise. Your stuff will be much more,
Educational.
more. How's that for a word?
Can I ask the two of you to talk offline about just
Yes.
making sure that y'all are on the same page?
Now, how are you all going to be reviewing the final report?
We have not got that far yet. And I think we're supposed to be done in 6 months from whatever the first council meeting in November was. So, somewhere in the first week of May or so.
Our first meeting was November 9th. I don't know.
I'll figure out exactly when our deadline is, but let's say it's April 30th for the sake of argument, because that's going to be pretty close anyway. I'd like to get it done, and we have to get it done because if there's any legislation that comes out of this, the council term ends at the end of July. And so I'm planning on, I've got a pretty good sense now after today. I'm going to try to tee up legislation to get going in the beginning of May, maybe middle of May. So for us to review it, whenever you guys have something, I guess we're going to do independent reading and we're going to get together and talk about it. And ideally, we would pick a date to meet right now.
So you understand you're talking 3 weeks for this thing to be
I understand.
booked. Okay, cool. Just as long as I'm good with that. So my goal would be to have a draft to you probably by the end of next week.
End of next week?
Oh, yeah. Maybe before that.
How about you, Ed?
I'll have to find out what all you want me to do and how extensive you want the history to be and all the support materials, but I'll certainly do my best to fold into that timetable.
All right, so when we get done talking about this process stuff, I want to circle back to the how detailed, because there's a couple different theories floating around. So I definitely want to talk about that. So that would be end of next week, which would be the 12th. And then,
And what that means for you all to see is, one, you need to see you need to see your recommendations in a coherent format.
Yeah.
And so there'll be some preliminary introduction, but once you approve all that, then we can put, the rest of it's background. The rest of it's just information about the process.
Yeah. Well, let me ask the group then, if we were going to see something in a week on the 12th, then when would we want to get together? And I lose track of which weekend Easter is. Is that the 20th?
I
think it's the 21st.
I'm off that, I know I'm off that,
Friday.
I'm out that Thursday.
Yeah.
I know I'm not available that Thursday, Friday.
So I know that giving ourselves a week to that 18th, 19th isn't going to work because of Good Friday. So we're either going to go for like 5 days and meet on the 17th, or we're going to go for like 10 days and right after Easter on like the 22nd, 23rd, somewhere in there.
Yeah, the 16th, 17th, and 18th for me is the ULI spring meeting. And so for me, I'll just
That
be,
week sounds like that.
Sounds like after Easter.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be after Easter.
So why don't we do this, because I'm not going to physically be back with you during a meeting. If you need somebody here, Rachel will be in town. I'm just doing a lot of traveling, so this is a great thing to do on those plans. It could be that if you all can get this and start looking at it next week, just to give any feedback, make sure the recommendations
Yeah.
meet your test.
How does the group open on Tuesday, the 23rd?
How much time will we?
Can we push it one more day, maybe?
I'm out of town on the 24th. I could do it on the 22nd.
You got a problem on the 23rd?
I've got something from 2 to 3:30, but I'm wide open otherwise.
How much time,
Yeah, how much
Bob, are you
time?
thinking? 2 hours?
2 hours.
I can make anything work on the 20.
The morning's best for me on the 23rd.
22nd.
I'm good before 11 on the 23rd.
Let's, somebody was not good on the, Brian can't do it on the 23rd.
Okay.
Monday, the 20,
I could do it if, like 2:30. Is afternoon okay?
I've got a flight, and I don't know when it is.
Okay.
Talia can't do it in
I
the
think you're back to the
I've got meetings
22nd.
with the mayor on the budget.
Wait, hang on. All right, so let's go ahead. If I'm the only problem for the 23rd in the morning, is that what we're saying?
Yes,
Am I the only problem, 23rd in the morning?
I can do the 23rd.
Let's go ahead and book it, and let me see if I can move this stuff around.
23rd, what time and where?
9 a.m. location to be announced.
Okay.
How much time should we?
2
go?
hours, 9 to 11. I can go
Yeah, and I
early
may
if you guys
leave,
want
I
to.
may need to leave 15 minutes before. I
Can
go
we
to
do-
11, but
You guys okay with 8:30?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a morning
8:30.
person.
I just have to leave real early because getting here downtown from Bellevue is a challenge now.
All right, so April 23rd, 8:30
Thank you.
a.m., 2 hours, location to be determined.
thank you for the accommodation.
All right, on the detail for the the ed part, I know, Brian, you've had a firm opinion about this, about keeping it,
The amount of detail?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to read a long report. And particularly if we have these information products available, I think, but don't take that as a lack of appreciation for what you've volunteered to do. But I think we need an appropriate amount of information on background, lean on the online resources.
Less than 10 pages is,
so expand a little bit on an appropriate amount of information.
I'm just saying.
What is TIF? Knowing we'll have, all the materials up. What this committee is.
The process, a little bit, not too much.
Process for the committee or process for TIF?
No, process for the committee.
For the committee.
Process for committee.
What we did.
Yeah, and how we did, yeah.
Description of what's on the SharePoint site.
Description, right, description of the resources. Yeah, that's good.
And links to wherever possible.
Yeah.
And a bibliography in the back.
Yeah.
That's where you put.
Liz,
all
you
the
got any
links.
different views on that?
That's exactly
Say it.
And then we
Talia
can look
mentioned
at
the
it to see-
bibliography
I
in the
said
back.
put a bibliography in the back with lots of links.
I just need to be sure that if I direct people to a link, that link
Yeah,
is
yeah.
going to be around 4 years from now, when somebody wants to read this.
We
4
had
years
said
from
that
now.
it-
Yeah, and we won't have a lot of that stuff set up in time for the report, like the map. Let me think about that. So that's just my view. I mean, are there other views? Should there be a longer history of TIF? And
So I think having this as our set of recommendations is hugely helpful. And I'm just wondering if there's any overview or policy kind of one paragraph or 2 paragraphs that sets this out, if there's any definition to that.
What do you think about that?
So what I would do, I mean, this is typically kind of that form follows function, is this was the charge to the committee who's participated, this was your purview, these are the areas that you looked into. Given all that, these are your set of recommendations
Okay.
moving forward. Following the set of recommendations are information regarding boom, 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 boom.
Okay.
yeah, and I mean, I think
Right.
why we did this,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
That's cute.
Bob called us together. This was a commit, right? But I mean, like, there's a broader why that I think we should articulate.
And that's why as you're reading it, you may say, hey, Liz, you're missing this, You all know I have no ego in edit. Edit away, please.
There are no egos on this panel either, so we're good. Yeah, we're.
So add however
That's
you
why I
want.
wrote it.
I would do it, I would do it really brief so that whoever uses it, it makes it usable.
Yeah.
And that way, you don't need to worry about if you're, to some degree, is have the recommendations in play. And it can be, and we encourage you to go look at these.
Well, and I think to Paulette's point that a lot of these committees, nothing ever comes of what they do. We've got some very concrete recommendations. I mean, if we make these recommendations, I think we'll be able to point to some things that we've already changed.
So I'm going to tell you the other powerful thing would be, Paulette, to that point.
I'm sorry?
The other powerful thing that would be to that point is if at the last paragraph, which is say, as a result of this, MDHA has agreed to do boom, 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 boom. The mayor's office has agreed to do boom, 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 boom. I mean, put it in there if you want to. Some of it may be long-lasting, but it's able to say that it is
Right.
actionable from that. I'll probably leave that paragraph open, and you all can fill that in. If that's the possibility, then why not? Because it also says that the work of you meeting had value in the meeting, not just in the product.
Yeah, and we've seen that already. I mean, MDHA has taken steps already.
So we should take credit for them.
Definitely give them credit for it. Anything else? All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For
Thank you,
Thank you
Liz.
so much.
everything.
My pleasure. Good.
I didn't think
Good
we'd
work,
get there
Bob.
that quick.
No, that was very helpful.
Was it?
Thanks.
I told him we didn't have to worry.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.